Kamitakiapi Leampetu Washte. Welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Shirley Snavy. ICT and PBS Wisconsin's shared reporter Erica Ayisi gives us an update on the Line 5 Enbridge hearings. Erica, what's the situation?
Thanks, Shirley. The controversy over the oil and gas pipeline through northern Wisconsin went before public as part of the contested case hearings across the state. In Ashland, Wisconsin, the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa presented witnesses in their challenge of the permit the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources granted to Canadian Enbridge Incorporated for a 41-mile reroute of the pipeline. Operational since 1953, Line 5, as it's known, carries 23 million gallons a day from Lake Superior to Lake Ontario. The tribe had sued to remove the pipeline from its reservation lands after easements expired, and in 2020, Enbridge proposed rerouting part of the line around tribal lands. Late last year, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources granted permits for pipeline construction that impacts wetlands and waterways, as well as granting permits to maintain erosion control and water quality in the midst of construction that includes blasting bedrock and drilling. The tribe and environmental groups challenged those permits, resulting in the court-ordered public hearings. Bad River Tribal Chairman Robert Blanchard was the first to take the stand. Frederica Freiberg of PBS Wisconsin has that interview.
Now, I know the tribe wanted the pipeline removed from your land.
Right.
Why isn't rerouting it around the reservation proper enough?
All that will do is shift the risk upstream, exposing more of the environment to be put at risk than what is now. But like I said before, we have ceded territories where we do a lot of hunting and fishing and gathering of medicines and other stuff. So I mean that's just it's just moving the problem upstream. We'll be downstream from that, and if something were to happen, it will really impact us as people and our way of life.
Circling back to something you spoke to a moment ago, during your testimony you spoke about the wild rice harvest. Why is that, and hunting and fishing rights you hold, so key to your community?
Well, we've been harvesting wild rice in the Kakagan sloughs for over 100 years. My grandparents harvested down there, and they made rice camps down there, and so that's near and dear to my heart, and a lot of other people also. But it identifies us as people. We were brought here for a reason, and one of those reasons is to go where the food grows on the water, and that was the wild rice, and that is quite dear to us. And as far as other things, hunting, fishing, and gathering, there's a lot of people today that use that resource to provide and put food on the table for their families. So it's very important to us.
Why are the waters and the land so important to the protection of those rights?
Well, we also feel that, everything out there is sacred. We use those resources, and when we go and harvest and we go and hunting or fishing, we take only what we need to do for our families. So, and we also believe that that everything out there has a spirit. Every living thing out there has a spirit, and that's what we're protecting, is the spirit of that medicine, the spirit of that wild rice, and the spirit of those waters and lands, to be able, for our future generations, to be able to enjoy that.
For its part, Enbridge states that they have learned what they do today impacts the next 7 generations, and that it has a responsibility to care for the land. What's your response to that statement from the CEO of Enbridge?
Well, I don't think Enbridge really understands, they look at it a lot different than we do, They're there for different reasons, and we're there to protect the land, truly protect the land and the resources.
Your Bad River Band is fighting hard over this. What will you do if the Line 5 project is allowed to proceed in this way?
Well, that's the big question. We are still trying to come up with some answers, and we're just going to keep moving forward and keep fighting.
We will be watching. Chairman Robert Blanchard, thanks very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
The last 2 weeks of September concluded hearings in Madison, Wisconsin, between Enbridge and Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, where both sides presented their cases in the public hearings on the proposed reroute of Line 5. PBS Wisconsin spoke with Jennifer Smith, the Director of U.S. Tribal Engagement for Enbridge, before the hearings. Here's that interview.
Jennifer Smith is the Director of U.S. Tribal Engagement for Enbridge. She joins us now, and thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, as you know, the legal fight over Line 5, as it's known, has been ongoing for years. Why is it worth it to your company to persist?
Sure. So the project that we've proposed is related to our Line 5 pipeline. Line 5 is critical for supplying the energy that our Midwest, Great Lakes regions all rely on. Millions of us every day are using the end products that Line 5 is transporting to 10 different refineries. It's providing natural gas liquids to other companies that will extract the propane and deliver it to the homes throughout the region. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that we can continue to safely deliver that energy that we're all relying on. And we proposed this project almost 5 years ago, over 4 years, and initiated the project permits because this is in response to the Bad River Band's request that we remove Line 5 from the reservation, which it currently crosses.
So your company has an Indigenous Reconciliation Action Plan that includes acknowledging an historical lack of inclusion of Indigenous people and their well-being. Additionally, the Enbridge CEO states, "We have learned that what we do today impacts the next 7 generations, and we have a responsibility," he says, "to preserve and care for the land, learn from her original inhabitants, and move forward together in the spirit of healing, reconciliation, and partnership. We take these responsibilities seriously." So how does that statement square with the pitched legal fight with the Bad River over Line 5?
In specific to the Indigenous Reconciliation Action Plan, our first plan was issued in 2022. That, we call it the IRAP, identified 22 tangible commitments and actions that we can take as a company to try and work with tribal communities. And since that time, there have been a number of successes to that in terms of, making sure that our tribal contractors, tribal community members are able to work with Enbridge and economically participate in what is it that we do. I will point out that it was the band that sued Enbridge back in 2019 regarding Line 5 crossing the reservation. And so even with, we are full steam ahead on this project, we fully expect to see the permits get reaffirmed. But at the same time, we want to work with the Bad River Band and tribal community we'd rather work together.
How do you respond to the concerns from those challenging the permit that a pipeline spill could impact the tribal community's very way of life that depends on clean water and wetlands for food sources?
First of all, I'll say we all depend on clean water as humans. And so we all have a vested interest in safety and environmental protection. We are operating these pipelines. There are hundreds of thousands of miles of pipelines across the U.S. that operate every day, quietly, safely. We don't hear about them. And so, Enbridge, for one, has invested billions of dollars over the years into the integrity of our systems. We are monitoring these pipelines 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are continuously running tools and doing checks to make sure that we know the integrity of our pipeline, we know that it's safe.
So what happens if this reroute is rejected?
The DNR did an environmental impact statement, which was done over 4+ years, and it concluded that those impacts will be minimal, temporary, and localized, just like with most, if not any, all construction projects. And so we fully believe that when we get through the contested case process, the permits will be affirmed and we'll be able to start construction. And we're ready to do that as soon as we get all the approvals required.
Jennifer Smith from Enbridge, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
In Madison, Wisconsin, for ICT, I'm Erica Ayisi.
He alii ka aina he kawa ke kanaka. He alii ka aina he kawa ke kanaka. The land is chief, man is her servant. He alii ka aina he kawa ke kanaka. Our land is both a responsibility and a privilege.
Call it traditional ecological knowledge, or native science, or even indigenous brilliance. It is spreading, and two Wampanoag citizens in the Boston area are helping it along. Stuart Huntington was there.
Amira Madison and Hartman Dietz
Natasuis Hartman, Nutamas Masipi Nim Masipi Wampanoag
are spreading the news. The pair have organized a series of events at the Boston Museum of Science, highlighting indigenous knowledge and the ways it can help our world.
Western sciences seems constantly catching up to many things that it was very dismissive of that Native people have known and spoken about for generations. The idea that we are all connected, that this is a single living system of a world.
Our world needs indigenous knowledge. I think this is the time right now because of what we're seeing that's occurring across the globe, the climate crisis that we're in. And honestly, I think it's also a human crisis in a way because we have not been taking care of the land the way that we should.
A recent presentation on cultural burning to create healthy forests included panelists Talia Landry, Wallace Cleaves, Don Gentry, and Juliet Jackson. Gentry shared success stories of traditional practices in his Oregon homelands and of an awakening in the broader community.
There's a better understanding how fire's been a part of the WUFO system and an acknowledgement that our people burned, to maintain the health of the system, to protect our communities, to stimulate plants that are important, to stimulate forage for big game. There's more of a recognition of that.
And the evidence from Klamath territory is striking. The devastating 2021 bootleg fire burned some 400,000 acres, but the trees and land tended by the tribe using traditional methods survived.
We're reclaiming and trying to move towards what made us healthy, and our ties to the land and use of those resources is critical for that.
Jackson noted a new acceptance of the old ways.
Having been born and raised and grew up in Northern California, growing up, people weren't talking about indigenous knowledge. There was no recognition of tribes and having that knowledge.
And now?
There's a recognition of the validity of this knowledge, the sacredness of it, and that it's needed and necessary. It's awesome that we were able to share our indigenous brilliance in this space and with others.
Cleaves from Los Angeles concurred, even noting an awakening on the local level.
As I mentioned, down to our local fire companies, they're excited to learn about culture burns. They're excited to learn about this. They know, they realize that the system wasn't working. It's very obvious to them. They're in danger because of how problematic the system has become. So that's been a real change that we've witnessed, again, within the last decade, really even within the last 5 years.
We'll let the event organizers have the last words.
In the United States of America, right? We're taught that money is time. We're taught that, land is just something that you own rather than something that you care for and that you're connected to. For us as Wampanoag, we believe that we are a part of the land. We grow from the land. Our creation stories talk about us being created from the land, our beautiful clay cliffs in Akuna. I would say that we're in a really critical time, and I think the world needs indigenous knowledge.
we cannot continue to operate on the same system that created the problems that we're dealing with. We have to look to something new.
For ICT from the homelands of the Mashpee Wampanoag, I'm Stuart Huntington.
A day of remembrance on September 30th, or Orange Shirt Day, brought together tribes in the U.S. and Canada to remember the children that never came home from boarding schools, some even buried at the schools with no record or tombstones. I spoke with Jourdan Bennett-Begaye about boarding school survivors. Thanks for joining us on the ICT Newscast. This is Jourdan Bennett-Begaye. She's our managing editor here at ICT. And you went to an event recently that honored those survivors and those that we lost at boarding schools. And this was in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago. Can you describe the event for us?
It was a National Day of Remembrance. It was celebrated a little bit earlier in Washington, D.C. The National Native American Boarding School Coalition was going to host this event on the Day of Remembrance, September 30th, but they wanted to hold it 2 weeks earlier because NCAI had the Tribal Unity Impact Days going on in DC, where tribal leaders can come and advocate for their very important issues on the Hill. So they thought it was like a very great timing with that. But the National Day Remembrance, this event, it was just filled with talks from their CEO, Deb Parker, and just had everybody from around the area or who were in town to talk about their experiences or talk about even being a descendant of somebody who went to boarding schools.
Some of the stories that the people told at this event were pretty gut-wrenching.
Oh, yes. No, definitely. They were definitely gut-wrenching. Dr. Ramona was the one who spoke out and who's on the board for NABS. And, she talked about, I guess, like just a very complicated history of it, but her experience too. And I think that's what this event is about and what people celebrate this day for.
It is a day of mourning for those that we lost, but it also is a day of celebration. Don't you think, Jourdan, that we've survived boarding schools, that Native Americans are still here and still celebrating their culture and knowing their languages?
Oh, no, definitely. I mean, that was one of the big takeaways that Deborah Parker, the CEO, and Dr. Ramona were saying and telling the crowd. Um, that day was we should be celebrating that day because we survived, and also a lot of these kids were told not to speak their languages, and yet they're behind the buildings talking, they're whispering each other at night, and they still had so much bravery and courage just to continue to keep going and to continue the languages, and that's something to be proud of, she said.
In my travels and getting to know people from tribes all over the country, I don't know anybody who hasn't been impacted by that history, by that boarding school history. My mom went to boarding school, as did her parents and great grandparents, and she went to St. Mary's School for Episcopal Girls, which was a different kind of boarding school than some of the ones that the Catholics ran or that the federal government ran. And I believe that it changed the trajectory of her life because she found out that she could go to college. She didn't have to just go back to the reservation and work as a nurse. She could go. And so she became an educator and an author. I'm sure you have personal stories about boarding schools as well.
Yeah, I do. My dad was the one who went to boarding school. I mean, he's the closest in family. His history with it was very complicated too. And he actually went a year earlier than you're supposed to. So I have like a niece and nephew who are 4 and 5, and they're tiny. They're tiny little things. I remember, I think it was at Christmas, my dad told my mom, like, hey, like that's how old I was. And I remember she just got so emotional. And even I did too when she told me later. But his older sister, who's a year older than him, was the one going to go to school, and his mom brought him with her because he was like, tiny. But then when they're registering the sister in, the lady looked at my dad, and my Nelly lady, my grandma, was like, "Hey, how old is he?" She's about 4. She's like, "Oh, we can take him." He just had the clothes on his back, and he was like, "What?" So they took him. So that's why him and his older sister went to school together. But 4 years old, going to boarding school.
Wow. I can't
Yeah.
imagine. I can't imagine. That's a baby. Thanks for joining me, Jourdan, and talking about this difficult subject.
Thank you. Yeah.
Native American radio stations across the country save the lives of tribal citizens. And now, with the elimination of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Indigenous radio's future is uncertain. From Wisconsin, PBS Erica Ayisi reports from Hayward.
And we're going to miss that greatly. 40% plus, now between 40 and 45% of our funding. That's a bunch of money. Is going away.
Jeffrey Jones, host of the afternoon show, wants listeners to know how much federal funding WOJB lost due to the vote to defund the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, or CPB.
Now more than ever, we need our listeners. So again,
He's hosting a pledge drive, asking listeners to hear his heed for donations.
we have an extra week of coming to you, our listeners, to ask for your support to expand.
Carl Habeck, general manager of WOJB Woodland Community Radio, says the station needs generous support to keep Wisconsin's only tribal radio station on the airwaves.
For next year, we're going to have to look for approximately $230,000 to maintain what we have going.
WOJB received funding distributed by CPB. It was defunded in July as part of President Donald Trump's Rescission Act of 2025. The administration took back $1.1 billion in pre-allocated CPB funds, threatening the operation of 57 tribal stations across the country, like 88.9 FM in Hayward.
It kind of breaks my heart to see it, but that's what's going on in this world today, and we get the repercussions of that.
Habeck says WOJB self-generates funds through listener member donations, underwriting and leasing their radio towers.
We actually self-made, over $250,000 last year on our own.
But Habeck says the rural radio station needs more.
We're not going to be able to make it with listener donors and underwriting together. Still not enough.
WOJB is on the Lakota Ojibwe Nation reservation. Habeck says they went on the air in 1982 out of activism amongst the Lakota Ojibwe tribal members.
The creators of the station were concerned about not having a voice and not being heard.
Boat landings where spears or fishing are packed with protesters, cops, and reporters.
In the late 80s, Habeck says WOJB educated listeners about tribal sovereignty in ceded territory during the Walleye War's spearfishing controversy.
You're going to take everything that's allowed to anybody else, and that's not right.
A lot of people misunderstood or didn't care to understand the treaty, the hunting and fishing rights of the Ojibwe people in northern Wisconsin.
Welcome to WOJB.
Thank you.
And today, Habeck says listeners tune in from the North Woods and beyond. Operating at 100,000 watts, reaching nearly 100 miles in every direction.
We just barely get up to Superior, but if you get up on the hill in Duluth, we reach that far. We'll reach down, maybe as far as Amory, as far east as Easley Park Falls.
Habeck says he's hopeful that his conversations with Native Public Media, a Native American-based public broadcasting organization, will help generate funds.
I think they could come up with something significant.
As he waits for South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds to make good on his promise with the Trump administration to take $9.4 million of unused climate change money and reallocate it to certain tribal stations.
I think it included the most needy tribes. I know we made the list.
A list hasn't been made public, but Habeck says the staff and volunteers at WOJB are up to the challenge.
I'm Jeff, and it's the afternoon here on WOJB Reserve.
And opportunity.
We're broadcasting from Lakota
to keep their community programming on the airwaves.
So we're going to have to do something above and beyond to generate the funds that we need that are unconventional to what we're used to doing.
Music from Perfume Genius here on WOJB from the new one called Glory.
From the homelands of Lakota Ojibwe Tribal Nation, I'm Erica Ayisi for ICT.
There's a new one coming out in
ICT acknowledges the passing of two leaders in Indian country. Ernie Stevens Jr. led the Indian Gaming Association for more than 20 years. He died September 26 at age 66. A citizen of the Oneida Tribe of Wisconsin, he advocated for tribal sovereignty. Nationwide, more than $43 billion in 2024 fueled Indigenous economies, making tribal gaming the largest segment of the U.S. gaming industry, according to the association. Sharon Asetoyer led the Native American Community Board on the Yankton Sioux Reservation in South Dakota. She died September 26 at age 74. A citizen of the Comanche Nation, she championed reproductive justice, family safety, strong communities, and culture with unrelenting passion and wisdom. Through the Native American Women's Health Education Resource Center, according to the Community Board. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.